Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Category Visionaries. Today we're speaking with William Gaviria Rojas, Field CTO and Co-Founder of CoactiveAI, a multimodal application platform that's raised $44 million in funding. William, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Brad?
I'm doing great. So we're just joking there at the start that I was going to butcher your name, and I certainly achieved that. So let's go ahead and just correct the record here. How do we say your last name?
Gaviria Rojas. And in Colombia, we usually have two last names, so that's why I kept both when I became a citizen here.
Oh, hey, I got one of them right. So at least we're hopefully starting off on a good foot here. Let's talk about that journey. So, coming from Colombia, what was that like when you first moving to the United States?
Yeah, so I was born in Colombia, born and raised in a city called Cali. When I was very young, around 10, my family had to immigrate, right? We got hit with some of the violence, so we came here as refugees. And I like to think that's where a lot of my entrepreneurship spirit started, because really we went from having, comfortable life. We weren't rich, but we weren't poor either. So then here, we literally had to start from zero, right? Like, I don't exaggerate when I say my guest bedroom right now is bigger than the single bedroom my dad, my mom, myself, and my sister had to share for like over a year, right? Luckily, what we didn't have materially, we had in a lot of support, right? And so even though, we were starting from zero on like food stamps and, remember going down to get groceries at a food bank, and kind of from that level started my parents going from working white collar jobs to then, my dad was literally working, I think, graveyard shift at Burger King. My mom was like, being in toilets, quite literally. But we didn't have materially, right? We really had each other for support. And that's really where, I asked myself at that point in time, what is my role here, right? Like, my parents are pushing as hard as they can to build a new life here. And I literally got to see that because we were sharing a single room. So it was really hard to hide anything. And I really pushed for education, right? That was what's right in front of me. That's what I could achieve. And so, again, I had to start from zero as well. I mean, first day of classes, I don't speak any English. I don't know what's going on. They try to hold me back a grade. They end up putting me in ESOL classes instead. And that was the beginning of sixth grade, right? First day of eighth grade, just to give you a sense, I was starting off in the gifted classes, right? I worked my butt off. I made it to there. And then I kind of continued that trajectory, right? Just really, hey, like, no one's going to do it by me. Got to roll it out my sleeves and have an amazing network of support of people that want to help, right? And leveraging that as much as possible, and like continue that momentum to then eventually go off to high school, where if I can share a little bit there of fun story is, I had 3 jobs. I was a high school student. I was, a college student doing classes after school. And then I was essentially a janitor for a bank. As soon as I could work to pay rent, I did that, right? And so you can imagine the folks that were there. It was funny, I was called Will, I was a janitor. And then I told them all, I got accepted to MIT, because that was kind of one of the big pinnacles of being able to push hard on education, right? And so long story short, work my butt off, get a full ride to MIT, and I'm able to attend and quite literally change my life. So, but again, I say, really from that story of coming here as a refugee and, building from ground up, I think that's where a lot of my entrepreneurship spirit was born.
How did that feel for you that day? I know it's been a while, but how did it feel that day when you found out that you got that scholarship to MIT? Like, did you know, holy crap, like my life just completely changed? Or like, is it not so subtle?
No. I had refreshed the screen. I did everything. I was like, there must be some mistake, right? But no, it was amazing. Got that. But I'll tell you the funny story. My parents didn't know what MIT was, right? So a lot of people tell me, wow, your parents must have been ecstatic. Like, I literally remember telling my mom, hey, mom, I got into MIT, right? And she's like, oh, cool. What do you want for dinner, right? That was literally the conversation. Then I was like, no, mom, I got into MIT. Sat them down. I Googled what MIT was and all this. And it really, when they actually got it, was about a week later, because they started telling their coworkers, and the coworkers flipped out. And then they came back to me and like, hey, this is kind of a big deal, right? And, the answer was, of course, yes, And then the second conversation was about like, hey, we can't pay for this. Quite literally, the tuition was like almost twice what my parents made. And then I told them, hey, no worries, get a full ride. And so, that was that.
Wow. Incredible. Well, thanks for sharing that story. That's definitely an inspiration, I think, to anyone that's listening in. It's hard to hear that and not feel inspired. For you, like, where did this idea to become a founder come from? Like, the whole time you're at MIT, was like this in the back of your head, like, okay, I'm going to do this, get through the schooling, and then go and found a company? Or where did that speed of like entrepreneurship really come from?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brett. There was always some life goals I've had, right? So after finishing at MIT, one of the things I wanted to do is like, I was first generation, right? First, my family to go to college. My sister and I both went to college and, I got admitted into MIT. I want to be the first doctor in the family as well. So that's why I wanted to get my PhD and kind of continue my education there. And one of the things I've always had as a goal as well is to start a company, right? And I didn't just want to start a company. I wanted to actually start a highly successful company that really defines not just, how we work together, but what success means, right? And partially is because as I was going through academia, right? In high school, sure, in Florida, there were a lot of folks that like came from backgrounds like mine and looked like me, right? And they were like Latino. Then I go to undergrad and they were, MIT did a really good job with diversity, but there were a lot less, right? And then I go to grad school. And even though I was in one of the most diverse programs, like there just weren't many of us, right? And so when you come out and you look even, who are the CEOs of companies, who are the CTOs of company? I don't think the first thing that comes to mind, unfortunately, is someone that's Latino, right? And I wanted to prove that, that no matter kind of how you grew up, like you could actually achieve this. And more importantly, I want to ultimately build ladders, right? I want to get to these, essentially, my goal in life is to make sure that the next generation doesn't have those struggles, right? And so I think the biggest way that we can do that is by showing not only that it can be done, right? But then by creating those opportunities for the future generations, right? And I wanted to be in a position where I could do that. So when I got to college, I helped folks get into college. When I got to my PhD program, I continued that. And then, now that I'm in the position that I'm in, one of my biggest passion projects is connecting with fellow Latino founders and especially folks in the early stages and really enabling them to succeed.
You get more and more inspiring with every question that I ask. So I don't know how we're going to continue this interview for another 30 minutes. Like, what else do you have left, man?
Thanks, Red. I appreciate it. But no, honestly, this is like, it's a real thing, right? I think when you come from a background like mine and you look around the room, there's not a lot of folks like you. It's hard not to feel this way, right, Red? So anyway, the biggest thing I say to everybody that I meet that's kind of on a similar journey is like, hey, let's put our heads together. Let's put our efforts together. Let's succeed right now and pull each other up. Then let's build that ladder. So like, there's not like 100 Latino founders today, right? And let's make sure there's 10,000 Latino founders in the future, right?
Amazing, man. I love that so much. Let's talk about the company here. So take me back to the big aha. Like, what was that aha for you that led to you, your co-founder, to say, okay, this is it. Let's go build this company.
So funny story, and I'll tell the full one because I think it's worth it. It literally started because I moved to the Bay Area and Cody, my co-founder, helped me move a couch. So I legally couldn't hire movers and to help me move in. It was July of 2020. I was moving here to start a job, right? And then really, I think Cody came over from Stanford. He helped me move a couch. We chatted about stuff. And one of the things we chatted about is we kind of traded notes on everything that was going on, right? We saw, when we went to undergrad 2009 to 2013, we got to see the big data revolution and how technology, like which was distributed computing at the time, enabled like an entirely new like business revolution around understanding data, right? But most of this data looked like tables, right? There were logs from e-commerce. There were tables from transactions, right? But we saw a similar setup where the next generation of the next Databricks, the next Snowflake, was going to be built not just around data, but data and AI. Because if you think about it, we have way more content now, not just data. So things that look like text, things that look like videos, things that look like images, right? And whoever can figure out the key technology to understand it at scale, right, will be essentially a massive winner, right? For two reasons. Number one, that data, unstructured data, makes up like 80+% of all the data that we have. So there's just a lot more and it's way richer in content, right? And number two, it's just a much harder problem because we're no longer talking about just doing mathematical transactions. We're now talking about problems of reasoning and perception, right? And so we kind of traded notes and the conclusion we came to is like, someone's going to build that next Snowflake and Databricks, right? The technology is there because AI finally got good enough at the zero shot to be able to do perception and reasoning tasks at scale. And we say, hey, let's keep chatting, right? Is there something here? And, that may have been the initial spark, right? Fast forward 12 months later, we slowly build kind of the vision and what we were thinking about and finally kind of hit an inflection point where, I always say, I quit my job and Cody defended his thesis. And then the following Monday, we started the company officially running. And, I think we onboarded with our original investors, A16Z, the Tuesday right after that Monday. So we hit the ground running.
What was that conversation like with your parents? Did they understand this idea? Or were they like, well, what are you doing? You got a job at eBay? Like, we're going so far. Like, what are you doing, man?
No. So what's funny now is like, I think so MIT was one of those key moments where they just kind of like, they like understood that like, I was just kind of my own journey. Then to get my PhD, that was a whole other conversation. I think by this, and then, moving to California, right? That was another conversation. I think by this point, they're just kind of accepted. They're like, okay, like you're going to do your thing. Go ahead, right? I had a similar conversation with them when I got a motorcycle. They're just kind of like, okay, you're just going to do your thing.
So just never do it now.
Yeah, no. My parents were very much so like, okay, my mijo, we trust you. Do your thing. Let's see what happens. And, they couldn't be prouder.
That's amazing. Yeah, it sounds like you have incredible parents there.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode.
You mentioned A16Z. Like, what do you think A16Z saw in you and your co-founder say, all right, let's give these guys some money?
It's a really great question, but I think you have to remember this was a fundraising environment back in 2021, and it's hard to believe, but a lot of investors we talked to, their response, we were saying, hey, we're creating an AI company around understanding images and video, right? I want to say roughly 40 to 50% of them, their initial gut reaction was like, hey, why are you making an AI company? This doesn't make any sense, right? And Brett, it's hard to imagine that now, given the prevalence of AI, but back then, a lot of AI companies failed around that time, right? The 2020 and 2021, right? So just to give that context, that was kind of fundraising environment we were facing against, that it didn't make sense to create an AI company, right? But what I want to say here is one of our, again, board members and original backer, Martin Casados, absolutely visionary guy for a reason, right? He saw the vision. He got it right away. He saw that it was going to be, a tough journey, but he ultimately believed in Cody and I to take it on. And so I think that's really what they funded, right? Was really us as founders and the idea of the vision that we had.
With a lot of the founders that I talk to who've been building AI products for a while now, they can say that, there was kind of a pre-ChatGPT and a post-ChatGPT world. And like November 22, like the whole world changed basically for them. Was that the case for you as well?
100%, Brett. So we will go into conversations before ChatGPT and people will be like, what is AI? Why should I care about AI, right? Post ChatGPT is like, we have some budget to spend, right? Like, what do you have that maybe we can spend, right? And I will say today that conversation has even evolved, right? Because last year, I think was all about the year of creating prototypes, doing POCs, kind of showing the art of the possible. What we're seeing this year is really all about that next level of maturity. Like, hey, what is the actual return of investments for this money I'm spending on AI, right? And that's where we're seeing a lot of folks really shift from the prototype notion to production notion, right? Like, how do we actually deploy these things in production? And what is the real value of these technologies? So there's been an ever-changing evolution. And yeah, bro, I mean, we started back in 2021, pre-ChatGPT, and we've seen the whole journey at this point. So it's been really interesting to see the sector get more and more mature in both their education about AI, but also really, frankly, looking for partners that can really demonstrate that real value.
At that time, so going back to November 22, like, did you recognize immediately, like, wow, everything just changed? Or was it more gradual?
I want to say that for us, everything has changed moment was, again, the inception, like kind of the initial conversation back in 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
More so than it was in 2021. What I do want to say that the ChatGPT moment really demonstrated is that, technology didn't have to be this, like AI didn't have to be this back of the house technology that's only accessible to a very few, right? It really proved that if you create the right interface, if you create the right way to empower humans, right? AI can be incredibly powerful and completely transformational, right? And the thing I really appreciated about that is that was exactly kind of our vision from the beginning, right? Our original model, we still have the sign here, is, it was very much empowering humans and machines to work together, right? And so it really felt like maybe not an aha moment, but a validation of our vision, right? And I think since then, we've seen a lot of people really double down on that, as opposed to just say making an ML tool.
Looking at the website, and I'm just going to read it here directly. So it's a multimodal application platform for content optimization and data science teams that eliminates the need to tag visual content manually. That's a mouthful there. So let's unpack that. First, what is an MAP platform? And then let's talk about the persona there. Like, who is struggling with that pain point of manual visual content tagging?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I want to say the starting point is even just the content that people have, right? So the analogy I draw is for structured data, you have tables and you have some sort of stack for it, right? You're on Databricks, you're on Snowflake, you're on something else, right? But there's a way you can go from the raw data to answering the questions that you have that power your business, right? What we argued was that when it comes to content, things like especially visual content, images and videos, there is no similar stack, right? And that's exactly what we wanted to create, right? So the vision here really for the multimodal application platform is people ultimately can use this content to drive the decision. So if I'm a media and entertainment company, right, and I am producing, say, a television show and I have ratings data, right, how can I understand what the thing that I'm showing is driving consumers to watch or to perhaps leave my show, right? Those are real business questions that have tremendous impact, right? and from the ratings data alone is not actionable, right? So how can we empower folks to build those applications that are ultimately powered by multimodal AI, understanding that content, and then driving insights and driving data and creating signals at scale, right? So that's really what it's all about, Brett. I want to say the starting point is, the bottom bit of the layer, think of the storage layer, like your S3, UGCS, your Azure Blob, right? Where you have your MP4s and your JPEGs, right? That's kind of the bottom of the layer, right? The next level of the stack is essentially Coactive, helping you really understand what's in it and providing you with like all the APIs so you can actually extract the signals you need, right? And the top of the layer is that application layer, right? Where like you, for example, want to build an analytics solution, you want to build a search solution, right? You want to build an automated tagging solution, or maybe something more specific for trust and safety, right? And again, you ultimately go back to how do we do that from just the pixel data alone that we have, right? And that's where we can help power those applications, right?
Did you ever watch the show Silicon Valley?
Oh, yeah.
It's like hot dog, not hot dog.
Yeah, no, I mean, like it's interesting, right? Because those are real perception challenges, and you'd be surprised in trust and safety how nuanced it gets, right? And again, what we really want to do is empower people to, maybe not just the hot dog, not hot dog application, but really that, like, that gets at the essence of it. The things are based not on some JSON or some Parquet file, but the things are based on the JPEGs and the MP4. The pixel data that has really been kind of trapped behind the need of having to have humans bridge the gap, which is kind of how we bridge the gap today, right?
When it comes to that term there, so the multimodal application platform, is that an existing category? Like, is your ICP sitting there, 2025 just started, like thinking, okay, like this year we need to, find an NAT platform, or is that a category that you're really pioneering and creating?
No, this is a great question, Brett. Something that we're really pioneering and creating here. So again, the persona that we're seeing today is you have a lot of folks that work with data, like data practitioners, and you have a lot of folks that are building products, right? And ultimately, you rely on things like images and video to really power the application you're building. So again, going back to a media example, let's say you want to monetize the content that you have, and the only way you can monetize is if people can find it to begin with, right? And so how do you build a search application that lets people just find what they're looking for, right? And the answer 5-6 years ago was, well, let's get a bunch of humans to label everything, and let's hope that the keywords that people search for are keywords that we tagged, right? The answer today, Brett, is you can use an application like ours to just have the query of what you're looking for, right? Have AI interpret the content, interpret your intent, and do the matchmaking for you and show you the search results. So you can imagine an entirely new class of applications that can now be developed on top of something like us, right? This is something that doesn't really exist yet. This is a category that we're creating. What we really see is this empowering this data practitioner and this product persona to be able to develop that next layer of applications that really utilize multimodal AI to its maximum, right? And again, starting from the point of your content, right? And one thing I'll add there, Brett, is I want to say at every kind of big inflection point in technology, there's been something similar, like, right, what does it mean to be a cloud developer, right? What does it mean to be an app developer, right? And then I think people are asking themselves right now, what does it mean to be an LLM developer, right? I think the thing we're really creating here is like, what does it mean to be a multimodal AI developer, which is different from just a text-based LLM developer.
On the site, I also see that you have it positioned as, the old way and the coactive way. To me, that sounds like strategic narrative that I think Andy Raskin pioneered. Is that what's happening here? Like, is there a strategic narrative that your team worked on?
Yeah, no, it's strategic because quite frankly, that's what we see our users tell us, right? Like, this is what we see when we talk to folks. Like, it sounds crazy today, but a lot of the folks that have the most sophisticated use cases centered around using images and using video, you're doing a lot of things manually, right? Because there's just no tools available, right? So when we think of trust and safety, right? Think about like, a user-generated platform, right? Where 99.9% of your content, it's going to be fine, right? But then you have that 0.1% of the content that it's incredibly like toxic, things that no one should see, and, can drive really outsized harm to your platform, right? You'd be surprised that a lot of folks, I'll speak from experience here, the majority of folks that we work with that have some of these systems are not automated in any way. It's usually underneath the hood is still manual review, still a human going through this image and say yay or nay on whether it stays or leaves the platform, right? And so, more so, less so than a strategic narrative, I think Brett's really speaking to the pain point that our customers are experiencing, right? And showing them that there is a better way. There is a new technology, right? But, understanding that there's the inertia from this is the only way they've been able to solve this problem for the past 20 years.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their U.S. and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
How did you narrow in and lock in on the market that you're currently in? Like, how did you know that was the right market? From my conversations with a lot of other founders, when they have technology that can be broadly applied to different industries, many different use cases, it's hard and can be very scary to choose one. It sounds like you very much have chosen, your market. What was that journey like? What was that process like? And what did you learn so far from that whole process?
This is a really great question, Brett. I want to say a few things. I think the first reading I highly recommend is, again, speaking to Martin Casado. He has an article called Market Annealing that actually part of the inception that I think we were talking about it over there when he was sharing his idea and we're kind of going back and forth. But highly recommend you check that article about annealing. And that's essentially kind of what happened, right? Annealing is a process where you have these two metals, right? And what you have to do is you have to, crudely to describe it, you have to heat them up and then you have to smash them together, right? Until they finally blend, right? And that's a little bit of kind of what the journey is like, right? So for us at the beginning, we had this key technology, right? The market was at a certain point. We had to go out there. We had to go and really test where we could apply this, right? Because from our perspective, we build a multimodal application platform that can help you search, tag, and analyze content at scale, right? That's very broad from a technology perspective because it is. We could have applied it to many different verticals, right? But we went out there. We saw what folks were really dealing with content and we're dealing with content in a way that was impacting the business. And just through a lot of, again, customer conversations, chatting with them, really applying like true discovery is kind of what we narrowed in. There were a few industries that in particular we could have the most outsized impact right away. And, the journey was really about discovering and digging deeper with customers. So we finally realized that, hey, there's one particular vertical that really narrowed that on, which was media and entertainment, right? And the journey to that was realizing that they had what is actually one of the most complex forms of content, which is video, right? Because if you think about video, you have a visual, you have an audio, and you have a temporal component connecting both of them, right? Which is really rich, both from perception, but also just a reason and perspective, right? And so you have this really complex data set, and you have really sophisticated use cases in terms of the way that they were using this content, right? But ultimately, all of these use cases were driven again by manual efforts, right? And so you have the combination of all of that. You bring a system like ours, and is a completely transformative technology, right? And so we thought, hey, this is the industry where we could be not only the most disruptive, but frankly, like be the biggest advocates for it, right? And so that's kind of how we went in the journey of going from we can apply this to everything to, hey, this is the one place that we can definitely land and we can definitely make the biggest contribution. And, besides that, also, I love the industry. Like if you think about it, like media entertainment is just phenomenal. Like, it's the thing that we all watch, we all do every day. It has outsized impact on our lives. So for us, it felt very meaningful to be able to start there and, help them together.
To go back to what I'd said earlier, this idea that I'd heard from a lot of other AI founders that, there's post-ChatGPT or pre-ChatGPT and post-ChatGPT. What a lot of them have said was very similar that, in the early days, it's like you're screaming into the void, trying to convince people to say yes. ChatGPT comes, all of a sudden, it's a different story, but there's also a lot more competition and there's just a lot more people battling for the customer base. So for you, like, how are you thinking about marketing? What have you done to rise above all of that noise that's out there?
This is a really great question, Brett. And, I'll share from two perspectives. I think the first one is even how we started the company, right? Like this was back in 2021, Brett. Like one of the first things I had to do was like essentially build something that act and quack like a vector database, not because I wanted to, right? But because it didn't exist yet, right? And, and then folks came along with different components. And so we built the company from the ground up, right? And so when a lot of competition started popping up, right? First of all, I think you got to be able to speak to your competitive differentiators, right? And for us, one of the core ones is like we weren't some sort of light wrapper around an LLM or ChatGPT, right? We had like core technical differentiation. There was a technical mode in which we could just process and do these things at scale in a way that no one else could, right? So really understanding fundamentally what it is that makes you uniquely different from these folks that had just been literally building from, like 30 days ago, right? But the second perspective is that even if you are well educated, right, your buyers may not be, right? From their perspective, they may be having 100 companies are in their ear telling them different things, right? So this is where I think it's really important to establish true partnership, right? And what I mean by that is if you just come to somebody like a vendor and that's really all you're kind of doing, this is just kind of a transactional sale, right? I think you can get far on that and there is emotion with that. But what we found to be much more powerful, especially when you sell into the enterprise, is like truly being a partner by listening. What is it that they're really trying to do? What is it that is really a challenge and a pain point for them, right? Understanding that and then educating them kind of like, hey, I'll give you an example, right? I go back to the trust and safety example that we did with Fan in one of our initial case studies, right? And hey, we heard the pain point of what they were trying to do with trust and safety, and we showed them, hey, there's actually a different way to automate this. There's a way that you can actually not have to do 90+% of the work, right? Similarly, now we're working closely with NBCU. It was a similar journey, right? Understanding what is their pain point, gaining their trust, being a true partner, actually solving a problem that they have, right? And then kind of going on that journey together. Because the reality is a lot of AI is still developing. We're just beginning to see the impact that we can do in real applications in the enterprise, right? And I say startup companies have the puzzle, and then, your partners on the other side have the other half. So really find folks that are willing to go on that journey with you. And I think that's the approach of how you kind of cut through the noise.
We're somehow at the time of recording, over 1 month into 2025. So already feels like the year is flying by. If we think ahead to the 2025 plans, what are the top priorities and what are you really excited about?
So, Brett, a lot of things. I think I mentioned this before. I think this is really going to be the year where folks are switching for, hey, let's do AI prototypes. So, hey, let's actually see the real things in production and see like what's actually driving value. So, a number of things I'm excited about is just been the sheer advances in the technology of Motor AI and some of the things that support it, such as like reasoning systems. What we're seeing is we're deploying live with some customers, right? We just went live with Thomson Reuters and Power in their Reuters Connect external search, right? And so super excited to see what the results of that is. We're live with other customers. And what I'm trying to get to is that now we have the testimonials, now we have the ROI stories, now we have a lot of these things that are coming out, and really going out there and number one, sharing that with others that could benefit. And I would say probably number two, just kind of seeing what the broader impact, right? Because if you can do these key stories, right, it only opens up the door to be able to do more. And so I guess what I'm really excited about is actually that switch. And like now that the stakes are real, right? The asks are real from businesses. There's no $5 million budget from the board that has to be spent on something right now. It's really about actually demonstrating value. And I think we're super well positioned from that standpoint, just given like all the initial successes we've had.
Final question here before we wrap. Let's paint a picture for the big picture vision. So we can go 3 years, we can go 5, we can go 10, however long you want to go out. What is that big picture vision that you're building towards?
It's funny. So people sometimes ask me this, and I always say anyone that tells you that they know where AI is going to be in 5+ years from now is lying to you, right? Because we just don't know where it's going to go. So I'll give you kind of the 3-year vision. From that is more of a fun exercise. So I think really the 3-year vision of where we're on is exactly this, right? I think from the standpoint of the technology, the product's there, right? This really from now, us internally from the company standpoint is all about building that go-to-market engine, about going after these wins, demonstrating real value and delivering that real value to customers. That's what literally this next 3 years are all about. That is the next phase of the company that we're in. And that's where we're extremely well positioned here from the starting point of 2025. After that, I go back to the original story. Like Brett, you asked me like, what drove me to start a company, right? What are some of the bigger goals in life? And, I think from the get-go, I think really what Cody and I want to do is, again, we want to prove that no matter where you come from, you can really achieve anything, right? And so I think about 7 years, I think about 5 years, I think about 10 years, and Brett is all the same. It's about building $1 billion business that's successful, that's proven not only how we successful from the standpoint of the business, but also in how we run the company, right? I think something I haven't talked about that's really important to us is the culture, right? Actually, the culture is the first thing we publish on GitHub. And I think I want to show that it's not just about being successful, but it's how you are successful. And for us, it's about showing that you can be different, you can look different, you come from different backgrounds, and you can achieve this success, right? And then to my other point, Brett, like along the journey, let's see how many ladders we can build for that next generation.
We have another podcast called Unicorn Builders that interviews founders who built billion-dollar companies. So our next interview will have to be on there. We'll have to hit unicorn status.
Actually, Brett, that's the real answer. Can I change it? I'll say if that's the answer, in 5 years, we'll do that one.
Amazing, man. I love it. I really love this conversation. Like I was saying there, you brought the fire at the start and it just continued. So you're an awesome founder. You've been an awesome guest and really appreciate you taking the time.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett. And, for anyone listening, always happy to continue chatting. It's a really fun journey and always happy to trade notes.
If people want to get in touch with you, if there's any founders that have been inspired and they just want to keep up with the journey, where should we send them? Where should they go?
Awesome. So I would say definitely check out our website. We really do make it a point to put out there a lot of this positioning, but also, kind of our journey from the culture standpoint on our blog. So please feel free to check out our blogs. And I'll say if you want to connect with me personally, the best place to reach me is just find me on LinkedIn. So Will Gaviria Rojas. Very few people have my name, so you should be able to find me right away.
Amazing. Well, Will, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Brett. Thank you.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.